Well, good morning, everybody. Seems like we were just here last night doing the Sunday night live stream, and welcome back. If you tuned in last night, welcome back today. This is 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm Robert Phoenix, and running a little late. I had one of those Mercury retrograde days. Couldn't find my wallet. Just running around scrambling, trying to find my wallet. And luckily, it wasn't a disastrous Mercury retrograde experience. In any case, we're here together, me and this guy, Mr. Jasper, who loves to be a part of the proceedings, likes to get in on the shoe. So, how is everybody this morning, Monday, the 19th of November? We're going to get into, it's not going to be a terribly long show today because we did about an hour and a half last night, but we're going to get into some stuff today. And one of the topics of the day is today is International Men's Day. I didn't know that until I woke up this morning and started cruising around the news. So since it's International Men's Day, I'm wearing my plaid shirt, my baseball cap turned backwards, and I've got my macho cat next to me. Good morning, well, Judy. I think we're gonna do maybe about a 30-minute show. Finally, a day. Yeah, happy Men's Day. I'm going to talk a little bit about Men's Day. I'll look back in time. There's a very interesting day that corresponds with Men's Day. Ninth House Gypsy says, "Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the men. You guys rock." That's actually that's a pretty good sentiment. I don't think it's generally held in the eyes of the media. An image of being a man now is it's really funny. I was watching this guy Sticks and Hammer 666, who I think is really good. I like watching him. He's very funny and he's super bright and he knows a lot of shit. Anyway, he was talking about how Vice magazine had an article called uh, "White Men Hate Astrology." Well, it was "Men Hate Astrology," and the subtext was "White Men Hate Astrology." I thought that was really, really funny. There she is again. Good morning, Ani. I thought that was really funny. The men hate astrology. I don't know about that. I've never fit into a bucket. I like astrology. I'm into astrology. It's what I do. I'm into esoterica. I'm into the spirit, the spiritual world. I'm into magic, creativity, art, and I really like sports. I like football. You know, I like heavy metal music up to a certain point. I like westerns. I feel like men have really been through the ringer, and I've talked about this on the show before, and I'll talk about it a little more today. And one of the things that men really went through a difficult stretch was the 1960s because there was a real. I mean, it was I think a kind of an interesting time, but also a challenging time uh, to be a man. And I was there when it was quite young, but I could see what the effects of what men went through in the '60s and said Jasper is very, very intense. Hey, Edgardo, what's going on? And I think men got really stretched by a number of different things. First of all, the challenge of the '60s was that there was this, with Pluto and Leo. It's the Pluto and Leo generation. Yeah, the nebulizer kicked butt. I love that nebulizer. The Pluto and Leo generation. What is Leo? Leo is the sun. It's the sun king, correct? And what is Pluto? It's death, right? So Pluto and Leo, that generation was about killing the king. And of course, the most symbolic death is the king of Camelot, who's Kennedy. Well, that's not the king ultimately that they were able to bag, but that's where the death of the king and the killing of the king was. Even at that time, Pluto was in Virgo, but to Pluto and Leo, in that generation, Kennedy was the king. Camelot and all the imagery and kind of analogies that went along with that. Good morning, Lori. And I've talked about this before, but the real king that they wanted to kill ultimately was Nixon, who is a Capricornian, and Capricorn being ruled by Saturn, the black sun. So this was a very, interesting time. And it's also, if you look at the context of the Vietnam War, this was also a very difficult stretch for men because prior to the Vietnam War, whether it was World War One or World War Two or the Korean War to a lesser extent, when men went to war and they came home, they were regarded as heroes, and they were people inside the community that the community honored, and they were probably just as fucked up, if not more, than people that came back from Vietnam. And it's a quiet story about World War II and some of the real pain that men carried around. But there was a whole different vibe about, so again, that was one of the things that theoretically you did to prove your manhood. War was a rite of passage. And so coming home from World War One, you were celebrated. Coming home from World War II, you were celebrated. To a lesser extent, Korea. So not so with Vietnam War. So that marker for being a man didn't really exist. And then there's a generation that's out to kill the king. And when you're out to kill the king, you're out to establish your own power and authority. And that is Uranus, right? Actually, Uranus is killed by Cronus, but it's the Uranian energy. You're out to establish your own authority. Uranus being the rule of Aquarius, the opposite side of Leo and the Sun. Okay, and this is where I believe men begin to kind of uncoil. And back in the 1980s, I was connected with the sort of the men's movement. I was young. I was probably too young to be connected to the men's movement, to be honest with you. I mean, I was 26 years old, and I'd gone through some stuff with my father and growing up, and there were certain things that I could relate to. But I remember going to these men's kind of meetings and groups, and there was this guy who, I forget his name, but he was like a prop master for the San Francisco Opera. And he was kind of involved in this Robert Bly work. And I remember going to like a couple of these events and seeing these guys who had grown up in the 60s and maybe even a little bit before. And a lot of these guys were wounded. I mean, really wounded, because they were also dealing with fathers from kind of a different era and a different time. And so it's very complex. There's this idea that they wanted to bond and wanted to be accepted, but their fathers are coming out of a different chute altogether. And at the same time, there's this inherent kind of astrological, code that says, we're going to kill the king, Pluto and Leo. We're going to find our own power and we're going to do it our way. And that was really kind of a coda for the 60s. And, there's an unraveling that takes place during that time because, like, I saw the guys who were dealing with pain and grief, and there was a reason why Robert Bly was popular. There was a reason why Michael Meade was popular, and it's because they were tapping into this very painful zeitgeist of men who were carrying around the burden of shame. Bly gets into this. It's one of the big pieces around the men's movement and the men's work at that time. The whole men's movement has gone in a totally different direction, right? Men going their own way, and there's a whole other evolution that's taken place as it's much different, because of course, Bly being a poet and a bard, he was looking for mythopoesis. He was looking for images and myths that spoke to the pain and the crisis that a lot of men were going through as they were beginning to reach middle age, their mid 40s or early 50s when he was doing his work. And of course, one of the sort of the central myths of the Bly work is Iron John, and sort of recapturing this ability to have like fire in the belly and be accountable and bringing your power back. And one of the things that Bly had insinuated fairly openly is the process of men giving away their power with women. and the sacrifices that they theoretically would make for women, and that they thought that women wanted. And as a result of that, became very disempowered, and women were less interested in them as a result. Now, I feel like that the women's movement is in the mix somewhere here. I remember, talking to a guy who, grew up in the '60s and went through the, trying to doing his best to be a sensitive male. And he said, "Okay, it's time for me to be a sensitive male, and that, because I'll be able to go date and meet women and bond and have a partner." And didn't work for him. But he was not somebody who was, really testosterone driven. This guy was a music freak, but you don't have to be testosterone driven to be strong and to understand who you are. The problem is that most men just don't know who the fuck they are, and by the time most men figure out who they are, a lot of times it's too late. They come to who they are, in their late 40s or early 50s, and half of their life has passed them by, and it's not getting easier. I see a lot. One of the things in my work that I come into contact with is I come into contact with millennials, and I would say I probably have a slightly paternal relationship with the millennials. And not because I'm trying to have a paternal relationship, but there's something that they connect with me in some ways, that they, either don't want to be, um, that they don't want to be uh, judged. They want to be accepted. They want a certain amount of structure, order, and form. Somebody that can tell it to them straight without being judgmental. I mean, so they're it's getting harder. It's getting harder and harder and harder for, I think, men to evolve. And now we're just getting, kids these days are getting bombarded with, all kinds of mixed messages of, what it's like to be a man, and in many cases without many men around, it's very challenging. And it's even challenging being a parent. It's like I grew up in a certain time in a certain way, and I can't say that my parenting style has been influenced by the time I grew up in. I'm a big sports guy, and there's this guy who's the coach for the Los Angeles Rams. His name is Sean McVay, and he's, the coach is supposed to be the father of the team. You go back and you look at like one of the most successful coaches in the NFL. This guy by the name of Vince Lombardi, and Vince Lombardi was just, was a hard ass. If he tells you you did something right or did something well, boy, you were really getting big time compliment. He's old school. Bill Belichick is kind of like, I'd say, the modern day version of Vince Lombardi, and he would take that as a compliment. Sean McVay's at the other end of the spectrum. He's 34 years old, and he's the coach of a football team. And he does not ask his players to call him coach. He asks his players to call him Sean. When he says, when they'll say coach, he'll retort back and say player. And when his players do well, he's celebrating with them like he's a player. But it's his intelligence and it's his grasp of the game and his ability to have command over situations that the players ultimately respect. And I'm wondering if there's a new model in here, a new model. Like, is Sean McVay giving us a new model for being a man? Because he's not lost any passion or joie de vivre. There's still this kind of youthful spirit that's emanating through him. And he's an Aquarius, so of course he's going to want his players to call him Sean and not coach. I mean, that's part of the deal. But he's also displaying a type of mastery and of his craft and an innovative way of doing things. Of course, he's 35 years old, so he's going to have, like, McVay is. I think he's like the outlier of being a millennial. He's right there. But it's interesting because we're in a time now where being a man and going through the challenges of being a man I think are greater than ever. And well, today is International Men's Day, and I wanted to give you some statistics that are associated with this day. let's see, 76% of the suicides are men. 85% of the homeless are men. 70% of homicide victims are men. 40% of domestic abuse victims are men. Men are the majority of victims of violent crime. Men on average serve 64% longer in prison. Men on average are 3.4 times more likely to be imprisoned than women when both committed the same crime. And it almost feels like with statistics like that, that the general error, I'm not saying this is the specific rule of thumb because, there's internet world and there's Twitter world, which is one kind of spectra of reality, which is, I think, very tenuous. But it is a tool of propaganda and it's a tool of entrainment. And because people spend so much time online, and because there's an echo chamber, and that echo chamber starts in Twitter or starts on Instagram, and then moves over to CNN or MSNBC or The View or any of these other outlets which tend to be more mainstream, or Hollywood for that matter. All of a sudden, this what I would call parallel reality, which isn't really it isn't really reflective of this other reality that I live in every day and the men that I see. I'm not in the homes of men. I can't tell you what it's like behind closed doors, but I interact with them and I interact with guys that, try to do the best that they can and do good jobs and take pride in their work. I mean, these are all really, are these male aspects? Can anybody do that? Of course they can. But this is something that has been inherently kind of male oriented and men driven. Like, you take pride in your work, you get in there, you turn a wrench, you do all the right things. And you look at something and say, I did this, you know? So you can't even do that anymore based on the new engines, man. They're all like encased in these bricks and, you look at it as like, good luck with that. Go get your pride under that hood, buddy. It's a conspiracy. It's the concealed block engine conspiracy to keep men less empowered. So you have to go drive your car. It's another thing now that somebody else has to do for you. No, I'm just kidding. But it's tough. It's challenging because the general consensus and theme is if you look in the media, if you're on websites, Yahoo, if you're drinking the Kool-Aid, and I'm talking like the Jonestown Kool-Aid. Well, men are the real reason that this world is in trouble. Not just any men, but men who have the this complexion. It's like it's the white guy. It's the white guy. He's the one, man. You just get him out of the way, and everything will be cool. Everything will be cool. But look at these numbers. Look at these numbers. 76% of suicides are men. 85% are homeless are men. 70% of homicide victims are men. There are some people out there, by the way, when I read these statistics, you know what their reaction would be? Good. Good. I'm glad. The world would be a better place when 100% of the suicides are men. I mean, truly, there are people out there that would feel this way. I'm not trying to be extreme, but is it a popular theory? Is it a popularly held opinion? I'm not sure, but I'll tell you what, certainly gets attention on the internet. And you know what else? There's no accountability for that, right? It's like it's okay. It is okay to be able to express that kind of extreme opinion. What if a man said, "Well, geez, it'd be really great when 100% of the suicides are women." If a man said that, I mean, like if I said that and I really said that and earnestly with what I'm doing, and I'm not, I'm just using it as an example, I'd be off YouTube, right? But if there was a woman by and large who said, "Hey, 100% of men, so 100% of all suicides should be men," I think there's a standard or a double standard in place, and I because we've seen it before. We've seen this before. This is what society at a high level in the corporate media ghetto is promoting. And we have to remind ourselves that that's not always reality. It is an amplified echo chamber that starts with some very shrill screams or very shrill cries of supposed injustice, and the next thing you know, we've got a movement afoot, and that's not really it's not really the case. You know, I want to remind people of the fact that the most watched network on TV, people that still have cable TV, by the way, is the Hallmark Channel. And I'm not looking to go back to a different time. We can't go back. That's not happening. But the sentiment that is is brought up, or the feelings that are brought up, or it's people that are looking for an island of sanity when roles were defined and people loved and committed and made sacrifices. And look, I've not always been the best at that. I'm still a work in progress. I have a lot to unlearn, and it's taken me 58 years of my life to begin to really unlearn stuff, and and I've been in a process like that for a while. But it's clearly it's accelerating, and you get to look back and you look at choices or I look at choices that I made when I was younger, during a time when those choices were socially promoted. They may not have been legally promoted, but they were certainly socially promoted. And looking back in that time, and it's like, wow, I probably didn't make the best choice. Although I'm not going to sit back and say I wish I had a do-over, because it's led me here, and I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy this connection, and it's given me a certain set of wiring inside of my head that I can tap into. So I'm not sweating it. But I look at the sort of the automated process that I was in, the things that I did, the things that I believed in, because on some level they were, I thought at that time, culturally relevant or edgy, and led me down a particular path for a while. So an interesting and certainly a challenging time, and I feel like I'm gonna have I've been thinking about having Zeus on, who is Regina's partner. We've talked before, and he's got a book called The Spiritually Aware Man. I think I'm going to have him on in the next couple of weeks, because it just keeps. I've been waiting for Chiron to go back into Aries, but I may have him on before Chiron goes back into Aries. And I think that this is really, an important time for men, because as we've seen, the nodes have gone into Cancer. The true node has gone into Cancer, and the south node has gone into Capricorn. And one of the things that men played a role in for a very long time was protecting their family. Protecting their family, protecting their children, protecting the farm. Were men perfect? No, but that was their job. That was their role. Excuse me. And then we had the police and sheriffs and security and the Pinkertons and all these agencies that would now protect us against that threat. And so basically, we subcontracted out our accountability and our responsibility to our loved ones. And part of that process has to do with taxation, right? That's that subcontract out. Okay, we're going to pay taxes. I'm going to subcontract out part of my duty and responsibility so you guys can do it now. Well, it took away something very vital that we men have played a role in for a very long time. And now we've gotten to a point where I believe that model is frowned upon, that it could be even considered chauvinistic, or not allowing some form of equality to take place. So men have, I think, kind of an uphill battle, but I don't think it's impossible. I don't. And I think every man has a responsibility in their life to themselves. And I'm still, like I said, I'm a work in progress. And I, and one of the things about doing this with you is that it helps me be accountable. I swear to God, it helps me be accountable. It keeps me in a place where it's like, man, I've really, I got to be that Johnny Cash guy. I got to walk the line, and it's not a bad thing in a lot of ways. But I think we all have to be accountable, and men, I don't think can underestimate their power and their influence. And and I know this for a fact. Both positively and negatively. And it's an important time, and it feels like it's not the most sexy job or sexy role, unless of course you you're transitioning out from being a man. In which case, it's like, oh hey, person of the year, congratulations. That's where you're going to get your social accolades. It's interesting. After last night's show, I was watching this. There's a whole series that this company called Eagle Rock. They do a lot of rock and roll videos, but they did a series called let's see, it was the Occult Secrets of Nazi Germany. I was watching some of that last night, and one of the things that was really apparent was that that was the roots of what took place with the Third Reich and sort of the Teutonic mysticism that was associated with that. The roots of that start earlier, and even like pre Weimar Republic, pre World War One, and it was the onset of the industrial age. And there was this group in Germany that practiced this thing called Lebensform, which is like the form of life or the life of the sun. And it was kind of this breakaway movement that was about being in nature, and it was kind of this solar worship, and they were into meditating and exercising, and they were vegetarians, and it was because there was this kind of major shift about to take place, and the shift was the industrial age. And a lot of what they were doing was kind of this reactive, and maybe not in a bad way, to be honest with you. Remember, this is pre-Nazi Germany. These were people that were moving away from what they thought were the real scourge of industrialization, which was, well, number one, industrialization, and the other was medicine. They did not trust modern medicine, that they were much more into herbal cures, and we would probably call homeopathy or naturopathy, right? And it feels like we're kind of in that place again, but in this case, it's not just what's happening in Germany, it's what's happening on a planetary level, because we are in this fourth turning, and we are moving into a new age. And it's not necessarily an age of light, although it is marketed as an age of light, or it will be. It's actually has some very, very dark implications. And I think there are a lot of people that are very unsettled, whether they can comprehend where this is going or not, because we're about to move into the realm of AI, and we're very, very close to losing touch with what it is to be a human. And if we lose touch of being what it is to be a human, then we'll lose touch with what it is to be a woman or a man. And in fact, that could actually already be happening as we move into 50 different classifications of whatever we can be, right? So it feels very similar. And it feels like with this true node in Cancer that and I'm not, look, and I'm not saying that what was happening in Germany at the turn of the 20th century was a panacea for what took place, because the industrial age. occurred. Modern medicine occurred. Just like automation and artificial intelligence, um, that's all going to happen. It's going to happen. Uh, However, and this is the caveat, this is what I think what people were tapping into at that time is that we don't have to be so ready to hand over our spirits to be reanimated by this dark new age. I'm going to tell you right now, when the robot stuff and the AI stuff happens, it's going to produce a lot of money. It's going to be the next massive boom, and people are going to get in on it, and it's going to be like when the car was invented, but with very very different consequences. So you men out there, hang in there, hang in there, and it's not an easy gig, but you know what? It's what we signed up for. It's where we are now. And it's I go to a lot of different websites, and you can clearly see, especially in the sports realm, like Colin Kaepernick is a perfect social divide. And there'll be something that'll be put up about Colin, like he wants to play football. Like he really, sources close to Colin Kaepernick says he really wants to play football. It'd be nice if Colin Kaepernick told us. It'd be really nice. There's a guy who's a wounded male. He's a very wounded male. He's actually a really good example of promoting somebody who really doesn't know who he is. And instead of killing the king, Kaepernick has been taken in by the king. And the king in this case is the god Nike, and who's his corporate sponsor now. Colin Kaepernick, just to give you a bit of a history lesson, was conceived out of wedlock in Wisconsin. And his mother, her last name is Russo, so she's Italian. And she saw that her son would have a better life if he were given up for adoption and raised by a good family. And that is what she did. She gave him up for adoption. And he was adopted by a family who at that time was living in Wisconsin. And they were in the cheese business. And then they relocated to Turlock, California, which is a valley town, Central Valley town in California. And Kaepernick was raised by very kind, very loving parents. Of course, they were Anglo-Saxon, Caucasian, so-called white people. And raised in a very loving and supportive environment, grew up just like any middle class, upper middle class kid. He probably didn't want for anything. He was a very good athlete. And he eventually wound up reconnecting. His mother, his birth mother, this is a story. You can find it on the internet. She wanted to reconnect with Colin. And she lives in Denver, Colorado, or close to Denver, if I'm not mistaken. Or she did. I'm not sure where she is now. But she reached out to him many, many times, and he could not bond with her because she had given up on him. So he doesn't know who his birth father is, and his original connection with his mother, for him, was severed. Of course, he's a Scorpio with Sun conjunct Pluto. He's a very intense Scorpio character. So when he makes a decision, that's it. He's also very secretive, which is why he doesn't talk to the press. Anyway, so he has a mother that he hasn't reconciled with. He doesn't know who his birth father is. And even though he was raised in a family that loved him and cared for him and gave him everything that he could ever want or need, there is a smoldering, burning anger inside Colin Kaepernick. And an anger in many ways that I don't think is very, very clear. It's not very clear. And it's more about rebellion or overthrow versus actually, trying to articulate. I can remember what he was trying to talk about when he was protesting. He wasn't doing a very good job, and I think it really scarred him because he hadn't really thought things out. He knew that there was injustice and things didn't feel right, and damn it, he was going to stand up for something. I think he has Mercury in Libra. Anyway, Moon in Aries, so he's got a Moon Mercury opposition. Um, so, but he couldn't really articulate it. And to me, what I saw was somebody that was really incomplete, who hadn't done their work. He hadn't done the work with his mother. He hadn't done the work with, hey, who is my dad? Who is my biological father? In fact, Kaepernick was offered a contract when he was with the 49ers. The 49ers were shopping him around. This is before he started kneeling. And the Denver Broncos, straight out of a Super Bowl win, were looking for a new quarterback. And they liked him, but they didn't like him at his salary. They wanted him to take less. Fairly fairly, healthy contract. And he said, no, I'm not going to agree to take less and come here and be your starting quarterback. And I can't get into his head. But I always thought that his mother living in Denver would be on some level difficult for him. In any case, what we're dealing with is somebody is trying to make social change. And he's attempting to make social change from a place of being wounded. And I think he's attempting to do something good to some extent, like he goes out and he buys suits for ex-convicts so they can actually have a suit and go get a job. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's cool. Go buy them suits, man. Go buy them suits so they can go have a decent interview, get a job before the robots. The robots have the best suits, man, or they will anyway. I guess what I'm getting at here is that we're looking at somebody who's a wounded male. Colin Kaepernick is a wounded male. And I'm not saying he's a wounded black male or he's a wounded white male or he's a wounded Hispanic male. He's a wounded male. And he's out there trying to make change, to do something so that he can somehow heal his own wound. And of course, Nike, the Pied Piper, is coming along and say, here, come on over here. Come on over. We got a deal for you. We're going to heal your wound. And we're gonna bring you in. And we're going to make you bigger and better. So, you guys out there, we got a responsibility. And part of that responsibility is dealing with the things that we have to deal with. The broken places and the challenging spots in our lives. And it's not always easy. It can be tricky. It's not like it's, done with that. You're done with it when the thing about Bly that he always spoke to was the amount of grief that men carried. And that the grief, of course, was a pool of suffering that was guarded by a volcano of anger. And that once a man would, and I think this is true for people in general, men and women, but I think men might be maybe more specific in some ways, that when men would get through the anger piece, that they would get in touch with grief. And then once they got in touch with grief, then that would be the place of their healing. And that's what a lot of that men's work was about back in the 80s, was for men to be able to grieve in a group setting, to look across from somebody and say, boy, you've got some issues. And I've got some issues. And guess what? We're here. And getting support in a way that women can't always give. because it's a very fine line when a man is vulnerable with a woman, right? There's a level of vulnerability that a man can share with a woman that will endear that man to a woman. And it's not in a calculated way, but it's in a very, almost mm, silent way in some ways that a woman can see and sense a man's vulnerability. But if a man tries to be too vulnerable and too sensitive with a woman, so that theoretically the woman can heal the man's pain, it is not going to work. And in a lot of ways, that's been sort of the bane of many relationships. So this is a very interesting day, and it's a reminder that we have work to do, and that we have an opportunity to work on ourselves in the midst of really like in many ways. Again, it's this cacophonous echo chamber Twitter reality, but it is in many ways kind of a firestorm in some ways, you know, to be a man during our times. It's really interesting. I was looking at like this day in history. I was looking for kind of an interesting sort of man day in this day in history. And do you know what this day in history is in 1998? It was the beginning of the Clinton Lewinsky scandal. On this day, November 19th, the United States House of Representative Judiciary Committee begins impeachment hearings against US President Bill Clinton. How about that? That is your International Man's Day wounded moments right there. 1998. What was that? 30 years ago today, right? Isn't that right? 30 years ago. Let's go 2008. Let's see, 2008. No, 20 years. Oh, my bad. It's early. I had to count on my fingers. I think that's the day. That was the day I was looking. There's some other interesting days, but I think that one, that is the day. 11/19, 1998. All right, let me check in with you people in the chat room. See what's going on. We have Tim Tebow to make up for. I love Tim Tebow. I think Tim Tebow's great. I always thought that Tim Tebow was. I thought Tim Tebow was blackballed. Tim Tebow, I think, could have. The NFL was afraid of Tim Tebow. The NFL was afraid of Tim Tebow. Corporate America was afraid of Tim Tebow. There were a lot of people that were afraid of Tim Tebow. I thought he was tremendous. And I'm not like a born again Christian or anything, but man, could that guy channel some holy woo or what? I mean, I saw Tim Tebow, who's Tim Tebow's like the bumblebee. Is a really you look at the bumblebee. How does this work, right? Tim Tebow was like the bumblebee of football, but he was a winner and he had such a tremendous spirit. I'll never forget when he beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in that one playoff game. Holy smokes! No, the Jets. And I felt like what happened with the Jets. Tim Tebow kicked Rex Ryan's ass one game. And Rex Ryan watched it and said, "I want that. That's ground and pound. I want that." That was Rex Ryan's deal, right? But it almost feels like they sent Tebow to Tebow to the Siberia football, and that was it. He was done. And he's probably going to start for the Mets this year. How about that? He turned himself into a baseball player. Let's see. Ani says, "I'm a Man fan. Tag it beyond painful. I find it fascinating how much can be made up these days with false information to impact communities and control. I sometimes feel like we are in the Hunger Games." Things start off. Here's what happens. Things will start off as a rumor or an innuendo or a soft ad hominem, and they'll be picked up by news services as if they're actual fact. And it becomes very, very damaging. That is the toxic news cycle that we're in. Sounds like CC needs a Chiron healing. Who's CC? CK, Colin Kaepernick. Maybe, maybe. Um, what else do we have here in the chat room? It's also different in other parts of the world. It is. You're absolutely right. It's really it's really funny. I should probably tell you this. Yeah, but you're right. It is, and there are other parts of the world that are very different values. Of I remember, I lived next door to this guy Arturo, who I've talked about, and so I was over there for like you know, I think I told the story before. I'll tell it again, but I was over there for a party. His son was graduating from high school, and they had a big dinner. It was, I'd say 90% Hispanic, a lot of people, maybe one or two generations from Mexico. And I'm sitting there in the living room, I'm drinking a beer with Arturo, and he says, "Come on." I said, "Where are we going?" He says, "We eat." And so I walked into the kitchen. Here I am, right? It was like me and the dudes, and the women, served the men. I sat down. We ate first. It was like, wow, this is kind of cool. I like that. It was like, okay, I'm not used to this. There's a very different kind of cultural sort of expression. I'm speaking from my own experience, and what's happened to people who have gone before me in my experience, and kind of where we are now. Do we still live in a society that wants to feel pride for what they do? I think that that's going away. I don't think we do. I think some parts of the country and some parts of the world, yes, but I think, having pride and respect and doing things well. I think that's it's kind of a lost art form. It's something that's passed down. It's a generational thing, you know. And I'm even having to learn it on my own because when I was younger, I had a disconnect with my father. Most young men do, by the way, at some point. And I had a disconnect with my father because we were just two very, very different people. Similar in some ways, but he was always about taking. He was a craftsman. He took pride in his work. It was one of the things he did. He couldn't really pass it on to me because I didn't hang out with him. I was out in the streets playing sports, or I was very athletic and very outdoorsy when I was a kid. I didn't like to be inside and work on stuff. We don't even get a Google Doodle for. I know what's up with that, right? Come on, Google. Oh, we don't want other people to feel any kind of pressure. We don't want them to feel stressed out. They might be triggered if men had a Google Doodle. Could you imagine if it was even remotely phallic? What kind of outcry that would be? Holy smokes. Let's see. What else do we have? I love dialoguing with you guys in the chat room. I see YouTube isn't doing anything. No, they're not doing anything. I'm doing something for Men's Day. God damn it. Today's Men's Day. Whether they like it or not. Okay. Anything else? What else we got going on here? Let's see. Any other comments? Juana says Pro 2. I'm Pro Man 2. Put it to you this way. Every time I cross the border of the United States, 3-7's Divine Michael. You just brought up something that I want to affirm. I'll never forget the first time I drove from the United States into Canada. It was like I went through this wall of like gravity and heaviness. It was like, oh, wow, I can breathe. Holy shit. Yeah. Hey, Koopa Troopa. Koopa Troopa in the house. What's up, Koopa? My son was a big Mario freak. He, big Mario freak. Um, Yeah, I experience that also every time. It's just so weird. I know it's strange, right? You leave, it's like I mean, look, I've been to other countries. Yeah, I feel that, but the most dramatic is just driving across that border, going into Canada. It's like my lungs just filled up with air, and the gravity just went away. It's like, what happened here? I'd go to Vancouver. I'm like, how can I live in this place? I love this place. My dad passed in '83. Let me see what Charles has to say. I do anything to sit down and chat. Sit things. Very emotional, Charles. Totally get it. Totally get it. No. Whether you're a man or a woman and you need to clear the air with somebody, you should do that. Not let your pride get in the way and work towards that. We can feel that. BC is definitely beautiful. Definitely, definitely, definitely. All right. Tim Tebow had different experience of childhood than Colin. Yes. Tim Tebow was almost aborted. Yeah, he had a very different experience, of course. But he's not playing pro football, is he? No. Colin Kaepernick was raised in a very religious household, for religious background. Colin Kaepernick is tortured in a lot of ways. Um, yeah, yeah, they were Baptist missionaries. Yeah, absolutely. He's a Leo too. He's the sun, right? Kaepernick's a Scorpio. He's dark. He's the dark sun with Pluto. Oh, look, I was very connected to Capricorn. I predicted the day that Colin Kaepernick would start for the San Francisco 49ers. I predicted it. It's on the message board. I looked at his chart. I looked at Alex Smith's chart. By the way, here's a trippy factoid. Alex Smith, who plays for the Washington Redskins, broke his leg yesterday. He broke his leg 33 years to the day that Joe Theismann broke his leg in the same stadium at RFK. And Joe Theismann was in the stands yesterday watching the game. It was pretty much the same break. How trippy is that? The bottom line with Tebow and the bottom line with Kaepernick is they both have been excluded from playing professional football. One, because he made some very, how shall we say, uninformed political choices. The other, because he was a lightning rod and he was potentially moving people in a way that I think the league was and the secularized portion of the NFL. At one point, the NFL was there was kind of a religious thing going on in the NFL. Like there was a guy by the name of Steve Wallace, and he played for the 49ers. And after games, Steve Wallace would lead a prayer circle, and it became a big deal. And after the games, you would see the guys gathering. They still do it, but the TV crews would show them sitting around in a circle, kneeling in prayer. And at that time, the commissioner was this guy, Paul Tagliabue, who's Italian and Catholic. So who knows where his religious affiliations were with that. But the league was not afraid of demonstrating that they had men of character, men of faith, and whatever, right? Whether it was marketing or probably was, but those guys were doing. They weren't afraid of it. They don't show that anymore. They still do it. But they don't show it anymore. Yeah. Yeah. Tebow's mother almost aborted him. Almost said no. And she heard that voice, right? Tim Tebow was homeschooled too. He's homeschooled, and he might be playing for the New York Mets next season. All right. I'm almost out of here. I couldn't really sleep well last night, so I watched a lot of media. I was watching an old rerun of the Carson Show, and so the Carson Show, as it was done back in the '70s, you couldn't do that show now. You couldn't do it. You go if you want to see what life was like before the politically correct veil came down. Go watch the Carson Show because it's raunchy. It is not PC. Some of it is cringeworthy, and some of it's actually really, really funny. But there was this one episode. It was interesting because they had a guest list. The guest list was Peter Falk, Seals and Croft, and the comedian Steve Landisberg, and Carl Sagan. Seals and Croft, Steve Landisberg, Peter Falk, Carl Sagan. But the unannounced guest was Muhammad Ali. And this is 1977, and Ali was at the end of his career. You could kind of tell that the fight thing was wearing on him. But when he gets up and gets out and says goodbye to Johnny, he gives a Masonic handshake to Johnny Carson. And then he gives another Masonic handshake to Ed McMahon. And I watched them do handshakes with other guests, and they did the same handshake that they did with Ali. It was very interesting. Um, let's see. I don't think anyone is going to sleep with this full moon in Gemini. I know. What's the story of Enchanted Rock there since I live here? Enchanted Rock is an interesting place. Like, there's energy there. There's serious energy in Enchanted Rock. It was a place where the Indians would hang out. And, it was a sacred area for them. Very sacred. And it's it's got a consciousness. And it has got a pretty interesting vert. Feels like you're on the moon. And, every time I've gone up there, I've been altered. Like, you get up on Enchanted Rock and you don't want to talk. You just kind of want to be there and, take it all in. And there's it's fairly large. And there's another side that's quite steep on the backside. Serious climbers will go up the backside versus going up the 58-year-old side in the front. But it's an interesting place. And if you you can camp out there. And if you camp out there during the day, the rock gets really hot during the summertime. And apparently it's I haven't done it, but it's very interesting to climb the rock at night. You don't have to go up very high, but you can, and lay down, and the rock is, you're getting this kind of thermal heat from the rock on the backside. And the great thing about it is the lack of ambient light, so you can see a lot of stars, constellations, all that stuff. Ani says, first time I heard politically correct, it rubbed me the wrong way. There's nothing correct about politics. They introduce these oxymorons and people eat it up. Yeah, there's nothing correct about politics. It's a dirty, 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 dirty game. And we're probably going to find out how dirty it gets with our little fluoride initiative here. Okay, I'm going to get on out of here. Hey, thank you again, everybody, for checking in, hanging out, and being a part of the Flame. Where it's located, Enchanted Rock is about 22 miles north of Fredericksburg on Milam Road. So you take 290, right, from Austin, and then you take a right on Milam Road. Go 22 miles, and that's exactly where it is. All right. Hey, listen, have a great day. Take a man out to lunch. Take him out to a manly lunch. Maybe just tell a man you appreciate him. All right. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step what's possible. I'll be back tomorrow. Have a great day.